It was a rainy day, and Briar Rabbit was wondering how he'd got where he'd got today, looking out of the window at the terrible weather and remembering just where he'd been left, trying to remember who'd lost him and when and why. He'd been left in some brambles for longer than he could remember. He could hear some gardening tools, and they stopped. And then he could hear somebody trying to figure out what they'd found. They realised it was a bedraggled little rabbit, lost, alone, waiting for a fox probably. Luckily, the person that had found Briar wanted to take him home and look after him. But as Briar waited for the rain to finish, he wondered what was going to happen next. He'd been left outside for so long, and they'd put him in the washing machine, which wasn't a fun experience. Maybe the rain would stop and he'd find out.
We've not been on this side of the room for a while. I've been having trouble finding the time to sit down and do the craft videos as much as I would like. Unfortunately, a lot of the projects are quite large, they take a lot of time. When you factor in all the filming, they get bigger. Yeah, it's been tricky finding the time. I do have some things that are partway through, nothing finished at the moment. It's just been a bit of a struggle. Additionally, I managed to blow out my knee recently, and that's made getting up and down off the floor quite difficult. Until that heals up, I'm a little bit limited in what I can do. So I was quite pleased when Pat brought this little guy home. Now you'll have seen his story at the start of the video. We've decided he's going to be called Briar. I keep calling him Brian, because that's where Pat found him. He's got no fabric on the inside of his ears. When he went through the wash, the fabric just fell apart and fell off. So I shall be replacing that. And I thought it might be fun to give him a waistcoat. This is something my gran used to do with my toys when I was very small, and it turned just teddies into my teddies. I've never really done it. I've never done clothing for toys, but it's a good way of personalising something if you want to give something as a gift, or if you've got a small person that would appreciate this sort of thing. It's not a very old rabbit, not a very valuable rabbit, but it would have been a shame to just pop it in the bin. We think he's going to live in the Lanchester, and he'll become the mascot for the Lanchester. So the waistcoat will be quite fitting. Let's go over to the desk and I'll show you how I worked out how to make this pattern. I already know the sort of shapes that I need to make. I've done waistcoats before, so I know roughly how they look. 2 front panels and a back panel. I'm not going to line this, I'm not going to put any structure in it because it's not necessary. The next thing to do is to take the measurements of your subject, and Briar's measurements are a bit strange because he's a teddy. So the collar is 9 inches and then the chest is 12.5. People aren't normally that sort of size. So when you do make the pattern pieces, they are going to look a little bit odd because the proportions are stretched out quite a bit. Your key measurements that you need is the collar, so you know how wide to make it for there. The chest, so it actually fits around the body of the toy. The waist, if it's like this one, because he's a bit pear-shaped. And then you need to know how long to make the front, so from the shoulder seam to wherever you want the hem to be. The shoulder width is a little bit tricky on this one because he doesn't really have shoulders. And your other important one is your arm's eye, and that's the depth from the shoulder to the fabric underneath the arm. This is the little waistcoat that I've made out of paper, and you can see it looks like a waistcoat. It is the same sort of shape. I was going to make it in one piece, but actually it's easier to get on and off when it's opening like a standard waistcoat. One main change I had to make was on the back. Because the tail sits quite high, I had to just cut the back so it wasn't straight, so it rides up like that. And that just stops the fabric on the back bunching, just makes it look a little bit smarter. I didn't want to make the whole thing shorter because this length looks about right on the model. When you take the measurements, you can do this in metric or imperial. I'm using imperial because that's what I'm familiar with for clothing. You don't want to pull the tape tight, you want to keep it fairly loose. And you can see that's 9 inches for the collar. For the chest, just decide on a point. On a person it's quite different, but on this little chap I went under the arms, so you have the arms here, so just under the arms, and then for the waist, because he's pear-shaped, I went for the largest point on the body. That means that the waistcoat itself should fit properly. There's not a lot of difference between those two measurements, but it does make a little bit of a difference. The tricky measurement is the shoulder, because the neck is here and the arm just sews straight onto the body. There isn't really a shoulder to speak of. So I just made that 1 inch, just so there's a suggestion of a shoulder, and that works well enough. For measuring the front, I just took a guess from the neckline down the body, just below where I'd measured the waist. It's all a bit ad hoc on this. It's not normal people shapes, so you just sort of measure it and play about with your paper until you get something that actually fits. The ears, they're a lot easier. All I shall do there is flatten the ears out on some fabric and trace around them, and then we can sew some new inners in. Once you've got all your measurements translated to those pattern shapes, this is what you end up with. You can make these front pieces here and here separate, especially if you're worried about the direction of the fabric you're using. I'm going to use this all in one piece because I'm not lining this, I'm not doing anything complicated. If you haven't allowed a seam allowance, when you cut this out, make sure to accommodate for that, because all I'm going to do is just turn these edges under and top stitch. That's all that's needed on this. The piece for the ear, we have 2 of these, and that's just a case of tracing around the ear, and then we'll sew those on, turn it the right side out, that'll be done. I'm joining everything together with masking tape because you can write on it, and for patterns this small it's perfectly strong enough. And there he is, all mocked up in his new gear. Because I've used a striped fabric, it's ended up with a diagonal stripe on the front, but that's fine. I have these 2 big paw print buttons that have been in my stash for ages. I wasn't really sure what to do with them, but they were too fun not to use, and they work on this really well. I have some leftover bunny fabric. Now, this was originally bought for a garment that never happened, and then it became the headlining of a Renault 6 I used to own. I'll just pop a picture in here for you. It just happened to be the right amount of fabric, the right kind of fabric, and it was really fun to do. I really enjoyed that project. Don't know what happened to the car after it was sold. It sort of disappeared, so I can't tell you more on that. Now, at the back, you can see the fabric goes in a different direction, and this is just because this is how I laid it out with the piece I had left over. The rise on the back of the pattern is to clear his tail, and that's easier to do than putting a slit in or something like that, and it stops this all rumpling up on the back. One little rabbit waistcoat all sewn up. All I've done is turn the raw edge to the inside. I'm not doing anything fancy with the stitching here because there's no need. This goes on the rabbit and then just stays there, so it's not going to get worn
we're not going to worry about frayed edges or any of that sort of business. I have the 2 buttons to do on the front, and I actually have to do buttonholes. I can't get this on the rabbit with it actually done up. And I've done his ears. These were nice and simple, except for the fact that this is a slightly stretchy fabric, this is a knitted fabric and fur, so they both wanted to move around a lot, and the camera was in my way, which is why I'm showing you now after they've been turned out, and they look great. So I'll hand sew these buttons on, and then it'll be reveal time.
Now he had his nice new waistcoat, Briar wanted to run out and explore the garden. There were some beautiful big roses. Better yet, there were some delicious raspberries, and he was going to have some of those. Just check nobody's looking first. Yep, coast seems clear. Let's go for it. Luckily, nobody really minded him having a couple of raspberries, and Briar was happy to sit amongst the chives and say hello to the bumblebees and the birds that visited the garden. Thank you for watching this very silly little video. It's been a bit of fun, something light-hearted and easy, and hopefully see you in the next one. Bye for now.